right, well, hello, everybody. Hold on. Now it's live streamed. Okay, hello, everybody. Welcome back to one of our Design Sprint meetups from Tel Aviv and from Stuttgart. Sabrina is with us. So everyone who came here from Stuttgart, Sabrina is here, but she can't talk because she completely lost her voice. So, so thank you for coming. And I'm just going to read something on her behalf. So today we have Teresa Torres, who wrote one of the most influential books, in my opinion, on product discovery and discovery in general. And I'm really nervous about it because it's such a beautiful book. It really is. It's so beautifully written. And just the concept of taking discovery and saying, no, it's not a finite thing. You know, it's something that is all the time when you're creating a product. That kind of blew my mind. That was really beautiful. And it took the whole book to really like kind of try to understand that and apply it. And it was just really, really nice. We're so excited to have you here. And I just want to read what Sabrina wrote because it's important that she has a voice here. So she said, I want to give a personal thank you to you, Teresa, for supporting our community with your amazing keynote, from which I already know it will add a lot of value for all. I read your book and I think you touch upon a great topic on how important discovery is for everyone, also outside the product space. True, Sabrina. I would like to add from my personal experience that lots of clients I run design sprints with are not used to talking to their customers. And it's always an epiphany for them just doing that. Having a structured approach means having a head start in every industry. So that's from Sabrina, who will get her voice back by the next meetup. But Teresa's going to do a 40-minute presentation. So I know everyone's going to have questions. Put them on the side in the chat. Teresa says usually they're answered. So listen to what she's saying, because most likely she'll answer them. Just give her a chance. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A for 20 minutes, okay? So this is so exciting. I just want to, yay! All right, so go ahead. You can share your slides. Okay.
All right, thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. I love seeing that people are joining from all over the world. So today we're going to talk about the what and why of continuous discovery. And I will share, one of the things I like to do at the beginning of this talk is just share that the framework and the tactics that I am going to share today have been tested in a lot of contexts. I've been really blessed and I've been able to work with teams all over the world, some as small as a two-person founding team, others as big as multinational companies with hundreds of thousands of employees in a wide variety of industries. And again, the reason why I want to share that is I want to encourage you to think about how you can take some of these ideas and apply them into your own work, because odds are I've worked with a team like yours. And I know it's easy to think, oh, that will only work at other companies. And so today I want to encourage you to think about what could I take back to my own company? Okay, so we're going to talk about discovery and continuous discovery in particular, but I'm going to start at the very beginning and just talk about these terms, discovery and delivery. We're seeing these terms become more popular over the last, depending on how long you've been following along, say 5 to 15 years. We often use discovery to refer to the work that we're doing to decide what to build, and delivery to the work that we're doing to build, ship, and maintain a production quality product. Now, the reason why this distinction is becoming so important is because we're starting to recognize that good discovery requires including our customer in the process. And we're seeing that a lot of companies are starting to put equal emphasis on discovery. Historically, we've overemphasized delivery, and we're starting to recognize it's not good enough to just build things well. We have to make sure we're building the right things. The other shift that we're seeing is we're starting to see a shift from more of a project mindset to a continuous mindset. So on the delivery side, we see this as companies move towards continuous delivery or continuous deployment. We're finally seeing the same shift happening on the discovery side. We're recognizing that digital products are never done, and we really want, if we're going to be continuously evolving our products, we need to be continuously engaging with our customers. So in my book, I started with a definition of continuous discovery, which I'm going to share with you. I define it as, at a minimum, weekly touch points with customers by the team building the product, where they're conducting small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. Now, there's a lot to this definition. We're actually going to break it down over the course of the talk. I'm going to start with this first line, weekly touch points with customers. This is really all about finding a regular cadence, right? So think about this as the cadence of discovery. And why is it important that we adopt a week over week cadence? So as product people, we're making product decisions every day. And when I say product people, I mean this really broadly. Anybody who works on a digital product in any capacity, we're making decisions every day. Some of them are big strategic decisions, like which customer should we serve? What outcome should we go after? Others are more everyday decisions, like what do we label this a button? How should this workflow work? What should the underlying data model support? Here's the thing. As we work on our products, we become experts on our products, right? We know where everything lives. We know what functionality is available. We know what order to do things. Of course we do. We're building the products. The challenge is our customers don't have that same expertise. They don't know where everything is. They don't even know what's possible. I'm sure you've often been surprised when you realize a customer doesn't even know that you offer functionality that you do. And the challenge with this is that we start to suffer from a bias called the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge suggests we can't remember what it was like to not have expert knowledge, right? So we've developed expertise in our products. We can't remember what it was like to not have that expert knowledge, which means as we make these daily decisions, we start to make them from our expert point of view and they stop working for our customers. If you need any evidence of this, I want you to pick up your phone. I'm guessing it's in arm's reach. And I want you to scroll through your pages and pages of apps and think about how many apps you installed at one moment in time where you were really excited about it. And then what happened in the subsequent weeks? You stopped using it. It didn't engage you. It didn't quite meet your expectations. It didn't match your mental model. A workflow didn't work for you. It was missing a key feature, right? We encounter this every day in our lives. Why is this happening? There's a gap between how the people building the product think about the product and how we, the customer, think about the product. Now, there's good news. There's a really easy way to fix this problem, and that's we simply need to engage with our customers more often. The more often we engage with our customers, the more likely we're going to see this gap. Most of us are already intrinsically motivated to serve our customers. When we become aware of the gap, we want to work to close the gap. It's that simple. So if we're making product decisions every day, I really want to see teams engaging with customers at least weekly. So we're increasing the likelihood that we're making those daily decisions from our customer's point of view. Now, there's another major advantage to this weekly cadence. A lot of us, when we start doing discovery activities, we start to adopt what I call a validation mindset. We do a whole bunch of work, and at the end, we validate, did we get it right? So the way this looks, we do a whole bunch of design work, we do all the pixel perfect production quality design, and at the end, we usability test with our customer to check the box, did we get it right? Or we do all the delivery work, and at the end, we A/B test it to validate, did we build the right thing? There's nothing wrong with validation research. We should do that research. The challenge is we're doing all of the work up front before we learned if we did the right thing. So we want to think about validation research as a way of measuring impact, not as discovery research, right? Instead, what we want to think about with discovery is how do we get feedback from customers much earlier in the process and much more frequently in the process? And as we do this, when we get feedback on things like which problems we should solve, on our pencil sketches, on our half-baked ideas, we start to adopt what I call a co-creation mindset. We're actually getting feedback from customers much earlier in the process when it's easier, cheaper, and faster to integrate their feedback. When we only get validation feedback, it's actually really expensive to change all the design. It's really expensive to change all the code when we learn in an A/B test that we built the wrong thing. Whereas if we get feedback earlier in the process and throughout the process, we can make changes faster and easier. Now, inevitably, when I talk about co-creation, somebody in the audience is thinking of one or of two famous quotes. The first was Steve Jobs said, if customers don't know what they want until we show it to them. And the second was Henry Ford allegedly said, if I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So what's Jobs and Ford getting at in these quotes? Here's the thing. When I talk about co-creation, I'm not suggesting you should ask your customers what you should build. That's not a good idea. That's not going to get you good results. And that's what Jobs and Ford are getting at in those quotes. That doesn't mean we can't learn from our customers. Here's our goal. As technologists, we have expertise in what's possible. That's what Jobs is getting at when he says customers don't know what they want until we show it to them. They don't know what's possible with technology. We do, right? However, our customers know about their own world, their own context, their own needs, their own pain points, their own desires. And so when I talk about co-creation, I'm talking about combining our expert knowledge of what's possible with technology with our customers' expert knowledge of their own lives. And when we bring those together, we're able to co-create better solutions together. And I'm going to get into what this looks like as we get further into the talk. So I've tackled this first line, weekly touch points with customers. The goal here is we're really looking to adopt a continuous cadence. We're engaging with our customers earlier in the process and throughout the process so that we can overcome this curse of knowledge, so that we can combine our expert knowledge with our customers' expert knowledge. Now, the second line, by the team building the product, is just as important. So a lot of people think, they hear the term dual track agile and they think, oh, I have a discovery team and a delivery team, and my discovery team is going to hand off to my delivery team. That's not what we want. That's not the intent behind dual track agile. The idea is that the team that is building the product, so your delivery team, is also the team that is doing the discovery. It's one team. And it really starts with this idea of a product trio. So a product trio is typically comprised of a product manager, a designer, and a software engineer. The idea is to get this team working together from the very beginning, making good decisions about what to build. Now, I want to contrast this with what we've historically done. Historically, product managers have worked with business stakeholders who maybe talked to customers, and they gathered requirements and wrote requirements documents. Those got handed off to designers who did all the design work, and then both the requirements and the design got handed off to engineers to implement. What do we see with this waterfall approach? Lots of handoffs. With each handoff, we lose context, we lose nuance. The people building the product are getting further and further away from the customer with each handoff. And we see a lot of rework. The designers get requirements that don't fit the design system or that are hard to design around, and we have to rewrite requirements. Engineers get designs that are not possible to implement, or they are going to take longer than the time we have budgeted, or the budget, or financially will cost more than we have budgeted. And we have to rewrite requirements and redo design. What we're learning, even though it's a little bit counterintuitive, is that if we actually get rid of these siloed steps and we get these three roles working together from the very beginning, making decisions about what to build, we build better products faster and at less cost. And so we're learning from experience that we want these three roles to work together from the very beginning when making decisions about what to build. As a result, it's these three roles that we want engaging with customers week over week. Now, most of us have more than 3 people on our team. We have additional engineers. Depending on your DevOps strategy, you might have QA folks or release managers. Depending on how you interface with the rest of the business, you might have data analysts or product marketing managers or customer success folks. Maybe you have the luxury of you having a user researcher embedded on your team. If you don't see your role here, I'm not trying to leave anybody out. I could have listed 100 roles on this slide. Here's the idea. We're living in a world where a lot of roles contribute to building a digital product. And we need to find the right balance between speed of decision-making and quality of decision-making. So I'm going to explain how this works. The more people involved in any decision, the slower you're going to make that decision. However, the more relevant, keyword being relevant, roles represented in a decision, the better decision that you're going to make. So we don't want to include everybody in every decision. That's going to slow us way down. But we do want to include the relevant roles at the right time so that we make better decisions. So the idea of the trio is the minimum decision-making team that should be involved in all of your discovery decisions. But based on the decision and the roles available to you, this concept can flex, right? So if we're working on our go-to-market strategy and we're doing discovery on how to bring the product to market, you're probably going to include your product marketing manager in those decisions and in that discovery work. If you're working on how to instrument your product and what you should measure, you're probably going to include a data analyst in those decisions. So don't think about the concept of a product trio as rigid. The trio leads discovery and consults and brings other people in and out based on the type of decision that they're making. But the key to understand is we're trading off speed of decision-making with quality of decision-making. So we want to keep the decision team small while leveraging the right roles and the right expertise on our team. So what that's led to is this team-based model to discovery. The team that's building the product, led by the product trio, is who is engaging with customers on a weekly basis. If they're making decisions, they're the ones that need to overcome the curse of knowledge. So they're meeting with customers regularly. And so now we're going to get into the second half of this definition. What in the world are they doing when they meet with customers? And our goal here is we're going to conduct small research activities. So we're not going to take our old project-based research methods and try to jam them into a weekly cadence. It's just going to burn ourselves out. And in a COVID world, nobody needs that. We're also doing these small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. So we're not doing research for research's sake. I see a lot of teams fall into this trap. It's fun to learn about our customer. We end up doing research instead of shipping products. Our goal is to do research to discover how we can create customer value in a way that creates business value. And it's really about aligning those two things. And I'm going to introduce a visual to help us do exactly that. It's called an opportunity solution tree. If you're new to this, we're going to walk through how it works. I designed this visual to help teams track and identify the best path to their desired outcome. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about outcomes. So I definitely advocate for outcome focus for product teams. This is different from what we've historically done. Historically, we've managed product teams by outputs. We've given them a roadmap and said, please deliver these outputs by these dates. Or we've asked them to tell us, what outputs are you going to deliver by what dates? We've been very roadmap driven. What's wrong with this? Well, 2020, we all got a huge lesson in what's wrong with this. If you started January 2020 with a fixed roadmap, regardless of what industry you're in, I'm going to guess that by March of 2020, that roadmap had to change pretty significantly when we saw the global economy slow down and everybody shift to working from home. Now, here's the thing. We're not going to face a global pandemic, let's hope, every year of our lives, but we do see our markets continuously change. We see new technology disrupt what's possible. We see new competitors enter the market. Even our own code releases impacts customer behavior, which changes the market. The world is constantly changing, and we're recognizing we can't predict the future. We can't decide in January what we should be building in June or November. Instead, we're saying, let's take a step back. Instead of prescribing outputs, let's evaluate what impact do we need those outputs to have, and let's focus on those outcomes. So an outcome is simply measuring the impact of outputs. It's that simple. As I go through the rest of this talk, I'm going to use Netflix in my examples. I've never worked with Netflix. They don't sponsor me. I use Netflix because people around the world are generally familiar with who they are and how they work. And unlike Facebook, most of us don't hate Netflix. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about outcomes in Netflix context. So most of us, when we're looking at outcomes, they're going to be derived from our business model. That's going to ensure that we're creating business value. So Netflix is a subscription business. They're going to care about things like total number of customers, how much money those customers are paying each month, and how long those customers stick around. That last one is a particularly important metric. So let's imagine that Netflix says to a product team, we need you to focus on increasing subscriber retention. That's an outcome. And then when we focus on outcomes, it allows us to give our teams a lot more latitude to explore and to experiment. We can say, we're less concerned about what outputs you build, figure out what it takes to drive retention. That's an outcome focus. Once we have that in place, we now want to look at how do we create customer value, because we do want to be customer centric. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to discover opportunities. Opportunities is a little bit of jargon. It represents customer needs, customer pain points, and customer desires. So we're looking at how can where are there opportunities to positively intervene in our customers' lives in a way that will drive our business outcome. So we're looking at how do we align creating customer value with creating business value. So there's the opportunity space is infinite. We're not going to look at all the ways we could create customer value. We're going to constrain it by the ways that we think have the potential of also creating business value. Now, in this model, outputs still matter. We do have to deliver solutions. So we're going to discover the solutions that have the potential to deliver on those opportunities in a way that drives our outcome. So this visual is going to help us make sure that we're staying customer-centric and also creating value for the business. So let's talk through how does a team do this? How do they discover opportunities? How do they discover solutions? How do they make sure that they're actually driving their outcome? Now, in an ideal world, when we're talking about outcomes, this should be a two-way negotiation between your product leader and your product team. By your product leader, I mean your chief product officer, your VP of product. At some companies, it's your CTO. If you're a teeny tiny startup, it might be your CEO and that product trio. Why is this a two-way negotiation? In almost all businesses, your executive is going to communicate in business outcome terms, financial metrics. They're going to say things like increase revenue, or maybe they'll get down to a business model metric like increase retention, like we saw in the Netflix example. The problem with these outcomes is they're hard for product teams to directly influence, right? Product teams usually indirectly influence those metrics. And so we want to translate that business outcome into a product outcome that the product team can directly influence. Now, this topic is bigger than this talk, but I will tell you the key to this is you have to have a theory of how your product is going to create value for the customer in a way that's going to create value for the business. And I'm going to give you a very simple example. If we told a product team at Netflix, focus on increasing subscriber retention, they might come up with a theory that's this simple. We believe that if we get you to watch Netflix more, you'll be more likely to retain your subscription. Really simple theory. So that team might choose to focus on increasing average viewing minutes per week. That's a metric that's measuring a behavior in the product. So it's a product outcome that the team believes is a leading indicator of that business outcome. So the reason why this is a two-way negotiation is the business leader is communicating, here's how you can create business value, and the product team is translating that to a behavior that occurs in the product so that they can directly influence it. Once that's in place, we're going to look at our first small research activity that we're going to do on a weekly basis. And that's to help us discover opportunities. So we're interviewing week over week to help us uncover the opportunity space. Now, the opportunity space is always changing. Sometimes it's changing in response to external trends like COVID. Other times it's changing in response to competitors. It changes every time we release code. Because it's always changing, we want to be continuously interviewing. Now, a lot of teams think about interviewing as a way to evaluate solutions. I want to reframe that for you. We're interviewing to discover customer needs, pain points, and desires. I'm going to introduce a second research activity later in the talk to help you discover solutions. Now, the reason why most teams don't interview on a continuous basis is because it's genuinely hard to recruit a customer every week. So I recommend teams start by automating the recruiting process. This is going to sound magical, but I want you to wake up on Monday morning and already have an interview on your calendar without you having to do anything. It's just there. I'm going to give you 3 strategies for how to do this. The first is you can recruit customers while they're using your product or service. There's a lot of ways to do this. You can do an interstitial or a pop-up. You can embed it somewhere in the interface. You can include it in a newsletter. Here's the key. You want to include it somewhere where you already have your customer's attention, and then you want to fully automate it. So you let them opt in. When they say yes, you let them through scheduling software, select a time on your calendar, and all you do is you see it show up and you talk to a customer. That simple. Now, we have a lot of third-party tools that help us do this. It's not going to be as simple as just turning it on and customers are magically going to sign up. You're going to have to think about this like a product funnel, and you're going to have to optimize it. You're going to have to experiment with who you ask, when you show it, how much time you ask for, what type of incentive you offer, how far out into the future you schedule. It will take a little bit of work, but I will tell you the vast majority of teams that I work with are automating the recruiting process using this method. This method works extremely well for recruiting B2C consumers and for recruiting B2B end users. If you need to recruit B2B buyers or decision makers, I'm going to give you a second strategy. And that's you can define triggers for your customer facing teams and say, when you talk to a customer who's experiencing this need, pain point, or desire, go ahead and schedule an interview with them for us. Who do I mean by your customer facing teams? Your sales teams, your account management teams, your support teams, anybody who's already on the phone with your customers all day, every day. So in the first example, we're using our product to recruit. In the second example, we're using our customer facing teams to help us recruit. In both instances, you want to automate it end to end so that your product team is not involved at all. All they have to do is show up and conduct the interview. Now I'm going to give you a third strategy, but I'm going to caveat it. I rarely want to see a team use this third strategy for very long. It has some significant flaws, but there are going to be some instances where it's required. If it's very hard to reach your customer, I'm going to give you some examples. You either have a teeny tiny total addressable market. I worked with a company where their customers were large US-based movie studios. They had 6 total customers in their total addressable market. Another example, your customers have 0, and I mean literally 0 discretionary time. And a great example of this is respiratory ICU physicians and nurses during the height of COVID. They're not exactly using your product. They're definitely not calling your support teams. When your situation is extreme like that, you can set up a customer advisory board and build long-term relationships with a small number of customers. The problem with this strategy is you're going to run the risk of building a product for a subset of the market and not the entire market. With qualitative research, it's really important we interview a wide variety of people. However, you can use this method to kickstart the process. And then as you start to build customer relationships, you can use those relationships to get introduced to other customers. So to know that this is a possibility, but you should not rely on it for very long. Once we have a customer in the room, we now want to look at how do we ask the right questions. Our primary goal when interviewing is to avoid speculative questions. I'm going to return to my Netflix example to illustrate this. If I'm interviewing you about your Netflix behavior, my intuition is to ask you things like, what do you like to watch? How do you decide what to watch? Who do you watch with? What device do you watch on? How often do you watch? The problem with these questions, all humans, 100% of us, are bad at answering direct questions out of context. Our brains are wired such that they will give us fast answers to those direct questions, but those answers will not necessarily reflect our real behavior. It's not because we're trying to be deceptive. It's just because we're susceptible to cognitive biases. We're just not good at answering questions out of context. So what we want to do instead is we want to ground our interviews in specific stories in the past. So instead of asking, what do you like to watch? I'm going to ask you, tell me about the last time you watched Netflix. In the context of that story, I can listen for answers to all of those direct questions. But now your answers are going to be far more reliable because we're talking through a specific instance. The other value of collecting specific stories is I get environment, I get context, I get nuance. I start to hear needs, pain points, and desires. Opportunities emerge from our customer stories. So we're interviewing to collect opportunities. I'm collecting stories about your experience watching Netflix. And as I do that, I'm capturing needs, pain points, and desires. As I interview, I'm collecting all of the opportunities across my interviews, and I'm mapping out the opportunity space. This is going to help me make a strategic decision about what's the best path to my desired outcome. Now, again, I want to emphasize how this is different from what we've historically done. Most of us, we talk to a customer, we hear a pain point, we immediately want to jump to solve it. We're missing the strategic decision of comparing and contrasting opportunities. This is going to be a theme we talk about in just a minute here. So what I want to see teams do is get the big picture view of all the customer needs they could address, and then choose a target opportunity. Start with one. What should we do first? Where do we think we can have the biggest impact on our outcome? Once we've chosen a target opportunity, I want to see teams work with a set of solutions where they're comparing and contrasting those solutions against each other. Again, this is different from what we historically do. We hear a customer need, we jump to the first solution. When we work with one solution at a time, we tend to ask what decision-making researchers call a whether or not decision. Is this idea good or not? The problem with this framing is that it exacerbates two very common cognitive biases. The first is called the escalation of commitment. The more we invest in an idea, the more we identify it with it, the more we fall in love with it. We've probably all experienced this as product people. We tend to fall in love with our ideas. We dig our heels in, we go to bat for them, right? The second bias is exacerbated by the escalation of commitment. It's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is well known now, but it's often misunderstood. Confirmation bias suggests that we're more likely to notice the evidence that suggests our idea is fantastic and miss the evidence that suggests our idea is flawed. People often interpret this bias to mean they're ignoring the negative evidence. This is not a conscious thing. You're not actively ignoring the evidence. It's that your brain is filtering it out. You don't even notice it. So what that means is even if you're doing all the right discovery activities, but you're only working with one idea at a time, you're not getting as much value out of those activities because you're not noticing. I'm not suggesting you're ignoring. You're not even noticing much of the negative feedback. The easiest way to fix this is to set up a good compare and contrast decision, to work with multiple ideas at the same time and say which of these ideas look most promising. This framing tricks your brain to see the pros and cons of each of these ideas. It's going to help you make a much better decision. We already intuitively know this. When you make a big life decision, like where should I work next? You don't talk to one company. You talk to several. You compare and contrast. When you're looking for a place to live, whether you're buying a house or renting an apartment, you don't look at one place. You compare and contrast. We forget to do this in the product world. This is an important enough idea that I'm going to give you a visual to help you remember it. This is Usain Bolt. I believe he is still the world record holder for the 100-meter dash. If you saw him running around a track by himself and I asked you, is he fast? I want you to hear a whether or not decision. Is he fast or not? And I want you to ask, is he fast relative to what? Is he fast relative to a cheetah? Probably not. Is he fast relative to a Tesla? In the first 100 meters, I would pay to see that race. Is he fast relative to other humans? Absolutely. What we're seeing in the photo on the right is a compare and contrast decision with a clear front runner. When we're evaluating solutions, this is what I want you looking for. I want you looking for a solution that's head and shoulders better than your other solutions. We're comparing and contrasting until we find a great option. Now, most of us don't do this, and for very good reason. We barely have time to just do evaluation activities for a single idea, let alone 3. So right now, you probably think I'm crazy. Here's why. We're still stuck in project-based research mode. So I'm going to introduce our second research activity that's going to help us quickly evaluate, compare, and contrast solutions against each other. I'm going to return to my Netflix example. I want you to imagine that I interviewed a bunch of Netflix customers, and one of the things that we heard over and over again was, I want to watch live sports. Now, I don't know about Netflix around the world, but I know in the United States, we have a lot of TV shows and movies on Netflix. We don't have any sports. So let's imagine that we heard this need. And we know as a good product team, we need to come up with 3 solutions. I'm going to quickly describe these. The first is we could integrate TV channels that already show sports into the Netflix interface and show a live feed of those channels. So for example, in the United States, we have a local network, NBC or ABC. I think Monday Night Football here is on ABC. I'm not really sure. We could integrate a live feed to ABC, which means when you open up your Netflix interface, you could watch whatever was on that channel right now. And as long as the game was on right now, it would solve this need. Second solution is we could say, let's partner with sports leagues directly and license the sporting events. So in Europe, maybe we're going to partner with the Premier League and integrate soccer games directly into the interface. Third solution is Netflix could say, look, we're not very good at sports. Let's find somebody who's already done this work and just bundle our subscriptions. So Fubo TV has already partnered with all these TV channels and is already streaming live sports. Let's just bundle Netflix and Fubo TV together. Okay, we have 3 different solutions. They each have potential. We're certainly not going to build all 3. How do we quickly evaluate which one is our front runner? The key is our second small research activity, which is we're going to test the underlying assumptions each of these ideas depend on. Now, this is not a new idea. Eric Ries talked about assumption testing 10 years ago in the Lean Startup. The reason why we don't test our assumptions is it's really hard to see our own assumptions. So I'm going to start by helping you identify assumptions, and then we're going to talk about how you quickly test them. Our assumptions tend to fall into 5 different categories. We tend to make desirability assumptions, assumptions about why we think customers want this. Why will they be willing to do what we need them to do? We make viability assumptions. Why do we think this will be good for our business? If we're an outcome-driven team, this is as simple as, why do we think it will address the opportunity in a way that will drive the outcome? We make feasibility assumptions. Is it possible? Do we have the necessary skills and abilities? I'm going to add 2 categories to this common Venn diagram. The 4th is usability assumptions. We're pretty good at this. We need to test, can people find it? Do they understand it? Are they able to do what we need them to do? The 5th we're less good at, and this is ethical assumptions. Is there any potential harm in building this idea? This is where we want to look at what data we're collecting, how we're storing it, who we're selling it to. Do our customers understand that? Are they okay with it? It's also where we want to look at social justice and inequity issues. Who are we choosing to serve? Who are we leaving out? Are those implicit decisions and we have unintended consequences, or are they explicit and we're understanding the consequences? Knowing these 5 categories will help you surface assumptions, but you're still going to have blind spots. So I'm going to give you a second strategy for how to surface assumptions, and that's story mapping. If you're not familiar with story mapping, it's the yellow boxes on this slide. I'm going to walk you through how it works. I want you to fast forward into the future and imagine we already built our solutions. And then I want you to map out what a customer has to do to get value from that solution. So in this case, we've partnered with the television channel. We're integrating a live feed. What does our customer need to do to get value out of it in the context of our opportunity? I want to watch live sports. So first, the customer has to decide they want to watch a sporting event. Then they have to choose a streaming service. In our case, we're hoping it's Netflix. Then they have to open that streaming service. Because we're integrating a live feed of the channel, they have to choose a channel to watch, and then they have to watch the game. The value of doing this is I can now go step by step through my story map and ask, what needs to be true in order for my customer to take this action? And that question is going to help me surface underlying assumptions. And that's what the gray boxes are. So my customer needs to want to watch sports. They have to want to watch sports on Netflix, meaning they can't already have a good enough solution. They have to know what channel the game is on. Otherwise, this solution isn't going to work for them. We have to be able to partner with that channel. We have to be able to partner with that channel in an economic way. The game has to be available in that market at that time on that channel. We have to be able to create a good live streaming sports experience, which is very different from a movie or TV show experience where we can buffer it and not worry about being close to real time, right? So our story map can help us generate a lot of assumptions. Why is this valuable? It's much faster to test assumptions than ideas. It often takes weeks to test ideas. We can test assumptions in a few hours to a day or 2. I'm going to show you how. The other advantage of this is that we have assumptions that differentiate our ideas, right? In this solution, our customer has to know what channel the game is on. In the second solution, where we're just integrating the games directly, they don't have to know that. When we're partnering with Fubo TV, they do. In one example, we have to be able to partner with the TV channel. In another example, we have to be able to partner with Fubo TV. In another example, we have to partner with the sports leagues. The assumptions differentiate the ideas. That means when we rapidly test the assumptions, we're collecting compare and contrast data to help us evaluate our solutions. So what this second small research activity, rapidly testing our assumptions, does is it allows us to start the week on Monday with 3 potential solutions and end the week on Friday with some early compare and contrast data. So let's look at how do we rapidly test assumptions. We're going to start with this assumption our subscribers want to watch sports. The first way we can test this is we can prototype. Now, the key here is we're prototyping to simulate a very specific moment. We're not doing a pixel perfect production quality end-to-end prototype of the entire solution where we're spending weeks figuring out all of the design work. We're looking at the moment in which the assumption occurred in the story map, and we're simulating just that moment. So if we want to test this assumption our subscribers want to watch sports, we're going to simulate the moment where they're making a decision about what to watch. I actually don't need to prototype an interface at all. I could just give you a list of options. here's some TV shows, here's some movies, here's some sporting events. If you were to watch TV right now, what would you like to watch? If I have access to an unmoderated testing platform, I can launch, run, and evaluate the results of this prototype test in less than a day. It's very fast. It helps me quickly evaluate the solution. Second way I can test this exact same assumption is I can run a one-question survey. The beauty of one-question surveys is they live within your product or service. So you're asking the question while you already have your customer's attention. It's just like recruiting for interviews. The key to one-question surveys is you have to ask a reliable question. Surveys get a bad rap because most of us write terrible survey questions. Fortunately, I've already told you everything you need to know. Avoid speculative questions. Ask about specific instances in the past. So I'm asking, have you watched a sporting event in the past week? This is far less ambiguous than, do you like to watch sports, right? We're asking about a specific instance. If they say yes, I can make this question even more reliable by asking a follow-up question. What was it? This will help me evaluate if you interpret sports the same way that we do, right? If you launch your one-question surveys in the context of your product or service, most of us can collect answers in a day or two. If we have a lot of traffic, we can probably collect answers in an hour or two. This is a very fast way to collect assumption data. The third way we can test this assumption is we can ask, do we already have data that suggests this assumption is true or not? What do I mean by data? Behavioral analytics data, support tickets, sales data, search queries. We collect a lot of data about our customers. Do we already have evidence that might suggest this assumption is mostly true or not, right? In this case, we might say, hey, maybe some of our customers are already searching for sports. Let's go look at our search queries and evaluate, are any of them related to sports? I can do this in an hour or two. This is a very fast way to collect assumption data. These first three methods, prototyping to simulate a very specific moment, launching one-question surveys, and data mining are going to cover the vast majority of assumptions you generate. There's one exception, and that's your feasibility assumptions. So I'm going to introduce a fourth strategy. Most of us need to run research spikes to evaluate our feasibility assumptions. A research spike is when you give your team a very targeted task and a time box. So you say, engineers spend X amount of time doing this activity, tell us the results. Most of the time when we do this, we're way too open-ended and we don't get a lot of value from our research spikes. To make a research spike an assumption test, we need to start with a very specific assumption. I'm going to give you an example. Maybe we have a concern about, we're going to partner with a TV channel and we're concerned about the metadata they can provide through their API. And we want to make sure we can show a title, a description, an image of whatever is on that channel right now. And we want to know how much work it will be to integrate that metadata into our interface. So we might tell our engineers, spend the next 24 hours collecting event data and evaluate how often we get an appropriate title, description, and image. Not only is this giving us compare and contrast data to understand how difficult this will be to implement, it's also going to help us give better delivery estimates if we choose to pursue this idea. Okay, we just covered a lot of ground. I'm gonna do a quick recap. We started by talking about being outcome driven instead of output driven. We're setting an outcome at the top of this tree. We're conducting 2 small research activities on a weekly basis. The first is interviewing to discover the opportunity space. The second is assumption testing to compare and contrast solutions so we can evaluate which solutions have the potential to address our target opportunity, thus creating customer value in a way that will drive our business outcome, thus creating business value. Now, because we covered a lot of ground quickly, I will share everything I covered in this talk is covered in detail in my book. I wrote this book to be a practical hands-on guide for product trios who want to put these habits into practice. I know that a lot of business books could have been written in 60 pages. They all stay really high level. My goal was to break that mold and to give you activities you can do week over week with your team to make better decisions about what to build. It is available in bookstores around the world. I recommend you check it out. All right, I think we're ready for questions.
Yay.
Yay. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. We've got a lot of questions. I think I'll I'll take them from the audience because we only have 10 minutes. So I'll first start the audience and then we'll ask ours. So
So I've collected the questions.
okay.
Always. Okay. So do you want to
Even
start
though
with
I'm dying to
Rose?
ask, but okay,
Yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
I have so many, so many. And
Dying.
hats
Okay.
off everybody. I'm telling you, this is an amazing book. It's so practical. Every page is a revelation. And me and Olit, we keep on like, oh, did you read that? And did you read that? And you got to read this. It's like that. It's just so great. Teresa, hats off. Really a great book and a great lecture. So
Thank
we
you.
have like a few quick ones from Ronnie. She asked, what is a design lead? Is it UX, UI, or a business designer?
It's typically UX, UI, but it will depend on your team, right? So sometimes like some API teams, like the designer might be more of a technical designer because there's not really, I mean, APIs are interfaces, but they're not graphical interfaces, right? So you'll want to match that design role based on the type of product that you're building, but most of the time it's a UX designer.
Okay, so Orad is asking, who should we talk to in a B2B to C products? The buyer or the end users?
It will depend on your team's scope. So usually most teams focus on one or the other. If you really do focus on both, you're going to want to interview both. And that's going to be hard. You're going to have a complex opportunity space, but you're going to have to balance the needs of both. Usually as our companies grow, we tend to have teams that focus on the buyer and other teams that focus on the end user. So it will depend on your team's scope. But if your scope really does cover both, you'll want to interview both.
I want to follow up this question. The barriers when there's a B2B to C is that sometimes the B2B, they protect the end users and you can't access them. So how do you go with that?
Yeah, a lot of us get resistance when we want to talk to customers, whether that's from our own sales and account management teams in a B2B context, or it's our customers and users in a B2B to C context. Here's the key. Most of the time that resistance is a fear of the unknown, right? Those folks are responsible for revenue. They're afraid that something's going to happen that's going to put that revenue at risk. We can overcome that resistance by reducing the fear of the unknown. Start small and iterate. Ask if you can sit in on one of their meetings and just observe. Once they're comfortable with that, ask if you can ask a question at the end. Once they're comfortable, tell them what you're going to ask and what you're trying to learn. Once they're comfortable with that, keep iterating, right? So the key there is understanding that resistance is just a fear of the unknown. Work with them to remove the unknowns. And I'll tell you a secret. If you do story-based interviewing, customers absolutely love it. And most of your interviews are going to end with them saying, when can we do this again? Because humans rarely get a chance to tell our stories and rarely feel that heard. So if you switch to an interview-based story format, like a story-based interview format, you'll find that your customers will want to talk to you more.
I have something off of that, which is story-based format interviews, like using prototypes not to validate, but as conversation pieces. You know, using prototypes to like trigger conversations with users, not to, it also validates ideas, but what do you think about that? Because like that really opens them up, that when I've talked to them with like these conversation pieces, so I call them.
Yeah. So there's a couple things to think about this. So I really like interviewing for discovering opportunities. And in that context, I want you exploring stories. With assumption testing, now we're trying to evaluate a solution, and we often use prototypes to help us evaluate solutions. And we can do some of that in our interviews. Just remember, they're different activities, right? So the bulk of the interview is to understand the opportunity space. We can take advantage of the fact that we have a customer in the room and also do some of our evaluation activity at the same time. But be careful, because oftentimes the way we test prototypes in a real-time interview is speculative about the future. And now we're going to be collecting unreliable feedback. So we want to make sure we're not getting into, would you use this and how would you use it? All of that's really unreliable. With assumption testing, the key is we're creating an experience where we're simulating something so we can evaluate actual behavior. And that should be the goal of our prototypes.
So yeah, I just back to that, getting the B2B2C. So would you recommend talking to the sales as a starting point and then going from there to like your internal sales? Would that work?
Yes, and here's what I'm going to say. Don't turn it into a giant project. Don't go to your VP of sales and say, hey, our product team needs to talk to your customers and let's figure out how to do this. You're going to hit a brick wall real fast. If you're an individual contributor, make a friend with a colleague. Find a sales rep, an account manager, a single person that's willing to experiment with you. Because don't turn this like organizational change is hard. Don't turn this into a giant organizational change problem. Look at it as, I personally want to find a customer to talk to. I know how to build relationships and make friends in my organization. There's plenty of people in my organization that have access to customers. I'm going to start there. And then as you start to see results from those conversations, share broadly. And that's what's going to create the momentum for the organizational change.
Love that. Make a friend. So Furkan asks, how do you balance the time needed for this work? The common result I have listened to is that we already have so much to do. Why doesn't the PM do this and then just consult with us?
Yeah, good question. So if you remember when we talked about our traditional way of doing things, the PM did do this and handed it off. And what did we see with the handoff? We see a lot of lost context and we see a lot of rework that has to happen. It really is counterintuitive. You will build better products faster if you start as a cross-functional collaborative team. And I know many of you may have never experienced this, and there's a little bit of a leap of faith there. I promise you, we've seen it over and over and over again in our industry. It is counterintuitive. You will not only move faster, you will build better products working cross-functionally. Yeah, it's just, if we look around our industry and we look at how digital native companies are working, this is the norm. This is how companies are shifting. Now, most of us don't work in digital native companies, and this feels really foreign. And the quote that I like to keep in mind is that William Gibson had this amazing quote where he said, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. And I do really believe this is the future. We are seeing our best digital native companies work this way. For a lot of us, we haven't been exposed to it, and it feels really foreign and it feels really counterintuitive. But I am pretty convinced, and so are a lot of other people in our industry, that this is the way we are headed. It's the only way to deal with the complexity we face, or it's the best way we know so far, I should say.
Let's talk in 5 years and see how that.
Yeah.
So here's a question from Lucas, who asks, what tools do you use for OST? Do you use a spreadsheet or more visual ways? Are you like a mind map or stuff like that?
Yeah, for your opportunity solution trees, I strongly recommend you use a visual tool, and that you use a visual tool that everybody on your team is comfortable with. So for example, I see some teams use Figma, but only their designer knows how to use Figma. I don't recommend that, right? If everybody on your team knows how to use Figma, use Figma. The key is everybody needs to be able to edit it and make changes, play with it and say, what if we do this? Or does this really mean that? The most common tools I see people using, Miro, Mural, the two really popular digital whiteboards. Some teams are in the Google world, so they use Jamboard. I've seen teams use Lucidchart. Here's the criteria I would look for. Multiple people can edit at the same time, so it's truly collaborative, and everybody on your team can easily get familiar with the tool, and that it be visual.
So another one from Furkan is, how do you bring this change? I think this relates to a lot of companies we work for. How do you make this change from, I guess, the outcome thinking with organizations that are not built like that start with the roadmap, and you're just a product manager and you just want to move there, but you need.
So if you're an individual contributor and your company does not work this way, I will share that I wrote an entire chapter in my book on exactly what you can do, because I know that the vast majority of people do not work this way, right? This is like William Gibson said, the future
Go
is
to
already,
the end of the book.
It's already, it's just unevenly distributed.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm going to give you the highlights. I really recommend you start with your own work. So even if you're given a fixed roadmap, you can story map your ideas. You can generate assumptions. You can run assumption tests. What's the value of doing that? I guarantee you're going to find problems with those solutions. And that's going to open the door to a conversation with your business stakeholders where you've brought new evidence to the table that broadens the scope of the conversation. We ran into a problem with the solution. What else should we consider? A great way to open that conversation is, what problem are we trying to solve? You now just uncovered an opportunity, right? So we can work bottoms up when we need to. And you individually developing these habits and working these muscles and trying to become more outcome focused, even if your company isn't, will make you better at your job. And showing how this work leads to better results will be the fastest way to change in your organization, rather than getting into the ideological war.
So for me, Tamar, while at the very beginning creating a product, you have identified the pain, and what if during discovery, people are so used to the problems they are used to that it becomes part of the modus operandi. How can you get to the bottom, and if they will be a customer? So you get this.
Yeah, this is exactly why in interviewing, you don't want to focus on your product. You want to focus on the customer's context and their needs. So I'm going to give an example. If I'm going to stick with Netflix because it's easy for me to build off that example. When I interview you, I could ask you, tell me about the last time you watched Netflix. And that's pretty good. I'm going to hear about your Netflix experience. I'm going to hear about pain points. That's a really great question for optimizing an existing experience. A better question would be, tell me about the last time you watched streaming video. Now I'm going to hear about competitors. I'm going to hear about alternative solutions. I'm going to hear about things that we don't do. Again, I could widen the scope even more and tell me about what you did last night. And I'm just listening for how you entertained yourself. And it could be you went to a concert. And now I'm widening the scope even more. What's the right scope? It depends on your team's outcome and your team's remit. But if we're story-based interviewing, we can play with that scope to break out of these fixed contexts that our customers often get stuck in.
Yeah, so true. Yevgeny is asking,
I think it's just it's the last one. So
okay. Oh, we have so there's so many questions. Really, we have it's just pouring in. So I was starting with Yevgeny's question. I think it's really interesting how this experience can help in small company. You've been talking about these Netflix examples. How does this work in a startup environment or a really small company?
Yeah, I will share that 100% of my full-time employee experience was at early stage startups. So I often worked at companies that were in the 10 to 50 people size. This framework really was developed through problem-solving, decision-making, critical thinking research. It is not specific to big companies or small companies. It is not specific to a specific industry. Like I said at the beginning, I have worked with a really wide variety of teams, which has given me the luxury of getting to test it in a lot of different contexts. The only thing that changes with startups, if you're pre-product, you're not optimizing a product, right? So your interview scope is much broader. The example that I like to give for this is, let's imagine that I want to start a startup and I'm focusing on podcasters and I want to help them grow their audience. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't have a product yet. I can still interview. I can still go to a podcaster and say, tell me about how you got your first 100 listeners. Tell me about what you're doing to promote your podcast. Tell me about the last time you did something that did that, right? So I can still explore that question, even though I don't have a product. That's going to help me uncover needs, pain points, and desires. I'm going to map out the opportunity space. I'm going to look for what should my product do to help serve this opportunity space.
Okay.
Okay.
We've reached the top of the hour. We could use another 10 hours.
Yeah.
I will share if there's a lot of questions that are unanswered. If you're willing to share the chat with me afterwards, I can look at. I have a ton of blog posts and short videos, and maybe I can help with just sharing other resources to answer some of those questions.
That would be awesome.
We'll do that.
Val, can you take an export of the chat and send it to Teresa, who's so generous of doing that?
Yeah, sure thing. And we'll email it to all of you, all the resources.
I just want to add another thing, that a lot of the questions here are answered in the book, and you should buy it and read it. So,
love it.
Yeah, it's an easy read. It's on top of that, it's very clear. It's an easy read. It's a fast.
I will share. I saw that we had some folks joining from India. It's November 1st, and I believe in India and maybe Australia, my book is a Kindle deal and should be discounted. So if you're
Wow.
in one of those regions, check that out.
Check that out. Orit, before you wrap it out, can you say a word about our next event?
Actually, I don't know when the date will be, so I'd rather just like send it by email. That's okay.
It's January 5th.
January 5th, we'll send it by email. Okay. Teresa, thank you so much. I'm personally taking your class, so I'll see you soon.
Oh, excellent.
I signed up for it. And everyone, thank you for coming. Sabrina is going to be with us with voice next time. Hi, Sabrina. Feel better. And thank everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for the great
Thank
questions.
you, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Sabrina.
you.
Bye-bye.